So yes, officially welcoming everyone. We have over 100 people on this webinar today. Thanks for taking your lunch break and joining us today. We are going to hand the bulk of the meeting over to two of our core team members, Bob Stegeman and Craig Leggett, who will be running the meeting today. Bob, as many of you know, was the Region 5 DEC Commissioner DEC Regional Director, and Craig is with the Town of Chester as a supervisor. Both core team members of CGA, both have worked really hard, and I see, I think we're ready to move this on over. So Craig, if folks can see him, you're next.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Callie, for that intro. It's great to see everybody here. Welcome to all of you who've joined the Common Ground Alliance winter meeting. We're glad you're here. Our goal has been to stay in contact with you more often and update you with what our combined efforts have been achieving. We love where we live and we want the best for it. The Common Ground Alliance is a place where we help turn those things into something long-lasting and enduring for ourselves and following generations. You'll see how this is being done in today's get-together. In 1 hour, we will see three different things. The first is the blueprint for the blue line. The second is a rollout strategy that focuses on attracting new residents to the Adirondacks. And the third is a panel discussion with residents of Millinocket, Maine. Colleagues of the CGA and the Northern Forest Center will guide you into each one of those sections. We will be monitoring the chat bar for comments and questions. We may not be able to answer all or any of them, but in the chat bar will be contact information and website addresses that you may use for follow-up. There will be a summary of today's proceedings and it will be made available to all of you. Details are to follow. I'll now turn it over to my friend, Bob Stegeman, a person who is immensely familiar with the issues and opportunities here in the Adirondacks. And as I do so, I urge you to take a keen interest in what our colleagues at the Northern Forest Center have to say. We are honored to have such a dynamic organization, giving power to the vision all of you have contributed to. So Bob, welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This has been, it's quite exciting to see such a collaboration of people and a resurgence of the efforts that went on last summer at the forum. And of course, one of the products of the forum last year was the blueprint for the blue line. It crystallized the conversations that we heard during the day and beyond. It was shared with all participants, so you should have it, and I hope you can be looking at that as this next session goes on. I want to thank Willie, Janeway, and Bill Farber for taking the lead on this. I'm going to keep this very short so we can spend as much time talking about it as possible. So I will toss this now to Bill with one other caveat. I think it was just said, if you have comments during this, use the chat feature, and we'll have summaries of this coming out. Try to do as best we can on that later on. So Bill, all yours.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you for the great introduction. We're going to keep this brief because, as Bob indicated, you all have copies of the 2021 blueprint for the blue line. You can see that we really condensed down the blueprint product this year, recognizing that it's really a product that we're using to try to engage Albany in the work of CGA. Well, the work you're going to hear about from the Northern Forest Center really is a broader representation of what we heard as the Common Ground Alliance. The blueprint, we really focused on 4 items, feeling that we really needed that kind of focus. As you know, at the time we did the forum, we thought that resources were going to be short, and so we wanted to keep this concise and targeted. We really, I'm going to talk about 2 of the first 2, and then Willie's going to share the updates on the second 2. In your blueprint, you can see that we really focused for the broadband cellular piece on the mapping piece with respect to broadband and some of the challenges that we know that we've seen during COVID with the lack of broadband coverage, how it's impacted all sorts of different impacts on lives, from education to telehealth to public safety. The good news is already, since we've had this out here and we're not taking credit for it, we're just acknowledging the success. Both houses of the state legislature have included the Comprehensive Broadband Conductivity Act within their one-house budgets. What that really means is it is tasking the Public Service Commission with doing mapping. So that's progress already since the time when we had the forum. We've also asked within the blueprint for the release of the Upstate Rural Cellular Task Force. That included a lot of information on mapping and things that could be very helpful to the cellular build out. We've gotten a very good response from some of the legislators that we've met with, ways that they can help us push that. The next piece is the childcare piece that we focused on in the blueprint. I don't think there's anybody that's a participant that doesn't understand how critically important that is for our communities, particularly as we look at attracting new residents. So that was to support families. It's facilitated enrollment to expand childcare subsidy for working families. It was support programs to advocate for the CARES money to go directly to childcare providers. As you know, since the time when we had this forum, there's now a new additional federal stimulus package that has more money coming to the state, more money going to local governments. We're trying to untangle right now what all that means to some of our childcare initiatives, and stay tuned for hopefully good news on that front. And then just support of the profession of childcare, really helping to elevate the gravity of childcare professionals and how important they are to the well-being of our communities. And with that, and for the other two items on our priority list, I'd like to turn it over to my CGA colleague, Willie Janeway.
Thank you, Bill Farber, and thank you to everybody here to our first ever winter meeting. The four items on the blueprint, the blue line flowing out of multiple years of Common Ground Alliance efforts and dialogue, the cell service and broadband piece, the child care, and then extending funding for the Adirondack Diversity Initiative, number 3, and securing increased resources and funding to manage increased use. So it's a good thing. Those things are each standalone important, but even more importantly, they rely on each other and they are interwoven. This incredible world-class landscape. Craig mentioned how much we all love this place. It depends on addressing these issues, and the blueprint is a way where listening to what all of you have provided in the form of input over multiple years on these subjects, we're able to speak with one voice to community leaders here in the Adirondacks, to national leaders in Washington, and primarily to folks in Albany. With regard to the two items that I'm following up on Bill Farber with regards to is the extending funding. This for diversity, this really gets at building a more diverse, a more welcoming, a safer Adirondack Park, helping the communities be more diverse and welcoming. There's $250,000 that was established in the state budget that goes to the Adirondack North Country Association. Nikki has been hired. There's a lot happening there. And the blueprint for the Blue Line this year called for that funding being extended. And both of the one-house budget proposals and the executive budget proposal in Albany all do that. So we are 3 for 3, looking very optimistic, though nothing is done until the budget is done. As most know, that's supposed to be done by April 1st. So we're optimistic on that. The other item has been receiving a lot of attention for multiple years, the overuse, the high use. The number of people coming to the park is a great thing, and how can we expand that number even more and manage it better? We know it takes more resources, more dollars. The blueprint for the Blue Line identifies that need for stewardship. It identifies the opportunity if a bond act were to come forward. And both of the one-house budgets have again stepped forward on this subject with proposals for increased funding for these subjects. A bond act proposal has been put forward. So I congratulate you all for helping to shape some messages that could be echoed by many different voices. As Bill Farber said, none of us can individually, and the Common Ground Alliance can't by itself take credit for this. Yet having us all work together and hammer out this common agenda is a huge reason that collectively we've been able to have such success. So those are the four items: the cell and the broadband, the childcare, the extending the diversity funding, and the funding for increased use and stewardship. There is good progress on all of those, and hopefully more to report soon. I see we're a couple of minutes ahead of schedule, but Craig, I will pass it back to you ahead of schedule.
Thank you, Willie. Thank you, Bill, for that update, and thank for all the advocacy that you are doing at the state level. It's very informative, and it shows one of the values that CGA provides for our beloved Adirondack region. We will now move into the second part of the meeting that discusses one of the best efforts afoot for our lives and livelihoods here in the Adirondacks. And the person whose skill and ability has been instrumental in bringing together the necessary energy and resources for this effort is Callie Brooks. She will lead us into this next section. So Callie, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Craig. I really appreciate it. So in 1974, I entered kindergarten in Lake Placid when the school population was 880 students. Fast forward to 2013, when my daughter entered the 3rd grade in the same school, the population had shrunk to 658 students. And at that very year, they made the difficult decision to cut a teacher and merge her grade into 2 classrooms because there were only 40 students in the 3rd grade. Like so many of you on this call today, we have been witness to the slow decline of the year-round population of our towns and villages. And now we know the numbers and the sobering results: shrinking schools, workforce shortages, stagnant growth, and loss of many businesses that made our region vital. So the work before us, attracting a new generation of residents, I see as the next big opportunity for the Adirondacks. While we are not finished protecting this great landscape, it's time to also put our collective energy, talents towards this strategy. And boy, if we get it right, it could be one of the most important efforts in terms of its future impact. A dynamic coalition of people and organizations have been working for over a year to develop this plan, which, as we all know, is being led by the Northern Forest Center. And you, the Common Ground Alliance, the people of the Adirondack region, have been a part of it too. And we are all critical to its success going forward. So I'm really pleased to be able to introduce Leslie Carrison of the Northern Forest Center, who's going to provide the plan's highlights and take us into our great panel today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Callie. That was a welcome, wonderful introduction. Like Kelly said, I want to really thank everyone on this call today because so many of you have helped shape the Attracting New Residents strategy, either through your participation in the Common Ground Alliance Forum last year and the rich breakout conversations that happened there, or through interviews and surveys and the many ways that we collected input into the strategy. So in our hour today, we really wanted to spend a significant chunk of time sharing a success story of a community that is not there, but is working to get there in terms of really turning itself around and revitalizing itself and attracting new residents. And so we're going to spend some time with some wonderful partners of the Northern Forest Centers from Millinocket, Maine in just a minute. But my task before we get there is to just very briefly introduce you to the Attracting New Residents strategy. And given just a little bit of time that we wanted to spend on this, I'm not going to share my screen or share any slides. I just really want to encourage you to take the time to have a look at the strategy. It is available on our website, and we'll be chatting out the URL of how you can download the strategy. It contains our compiled ideas of what the attributes of successful communities are that will do the best in this work as we move forward, and so what we should be shooting for as we go. A guide to implementation, tools that communities can use, and a rich body of data that we collected along the way as we were working on the strategy. So I really encourage you to take the time to download it. And at the link that Maura just shared, there is both an executive summary and the full strategy. So please take a look and tell us what you think. And then my second important task here is to let you know that we are getting to work implementing the strategy. We do not want this to be a document that sits on the shelf and gathers dust. We want it to be something that we all collectively use and implement and do something with. And so there are 4 mechanisms that we will be thinking about in terms of how we do that work. The first is to share information and ideas. So we will be sending out e-newsletters, we'll be hosting webinars, we'll have sort of regular channels of communication. And we have a brief survey that we have developed that you can click on in the chat bar, that SurveyMonkey link that Maura just sent out. What I would encourage you to do is click on that link, and then after our panel is concluded, take the time to fill out the survey. It's just a few questions that ask whether you want to be kept in the loop about the Attracting New Residents implementation process. So it's a chance to sign up for that e-newsletter, for example. So information sharing is one important technique. We see that a lot of the work of implementing the strategy will take place in and with communities. And so, as I mentioned, the strategy includes some tools that communities can use in that work, and we are available on a limited basis to help communities implement those strategies. So please reach out to me, fill out the survey, etc., if you're interested in being part of that piece of the process, if you see a role for your community to implement the strategy. A third approach to the work is going to be to facilitate interest groups, so to convene and facilitate conversations around some of the important thematic issues that we know need to be addressed if we're going to be successful in attracting new residents as a region. And then a fourth component of the work will be to continue partnerships with the Common Ground Alliance and other regional conversations to implement and coordinate regional action. So that is just the quickest taste of what this is going to look like, but we invite you all to continue to participate and to stay involved in this effort. And we know that we won't be successful unless we are all working together in this. So I think with that, I want to turn it over to Rob Riley. He is the president at the Northern Forest Center and has worked closely with our partners in Millinocket, and he's going to introduce you to a community where the center has made some significant investments.
Thanks, Leslie, and thanks to the host committee for setting this up today. I hope everybody can hear me all right. I'm going to share my screen for a moment. I'm going to set up sort of the context and introduce you to the town of Millinocket as best I can from afar, and then transition to our panelists for them to each share their story with you in the limited time that we have. If this was an open panel and an open forum and I'd see all of you sitting in front of me, I'd ask you to raise your hand who has been to Millinocket, Maine. And some of you I think have been by RV or others to either hike or experience the great outdoors. But I'm just going to start with the orientation of where Millinocket is. You can see the pin here in central Maine. This is a screenshot from the town website talking about big community and the Maine's biggest small town. This context for me should be familiar to you all in terms of how this community sits in the forest. And this is when we think about our work across 4 states as the Northern Forest Center, where we see similarities and where we see differences. And clearly from a landscape perspective, the sheer size and scope of the forest in Maine really reflect that of the Adirondacks. And so bringing Millinocket's story to you today is part of that. Now I'm going to do injustice to the story of Millinocket, but really just to say that here is the town. It sits adjacent to millions of acres of forest. In the background, you can see the summit of Katahdin, which sits within Baxter State Park. Adjacent to this great land that you see here is the Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument, and a mosaic of public and private lands are mixed. Like many places across the region that have been traditionally rooted in pulp and paper, Millinocket has had its highs and lows. It was once called the Magic City, for it sprang out of the wilderness overnight at the confluence of water power and forests. And fast forward to 150 years later to 2014, the town manager was quoted in this New York Times article saying, what we see here, we're in a significant downsizing mode and there isn't anything that's going to save us. There are towns that become ghost towns, faded away. If we do nothing, that's probably what will happen. But luckily, people didn't let that happen. It started out with looking at the forest-based economy, both the legacy of outdoor recreation and forest management, and new investments were made by businesses, by the public sector. Eventually, new events were created to bring thousands of people in to the community. But as we know, it takes more than just people coming in on a weekend. It takes concerted, focal, and focused development within the community. Downtown Millinocket is very similar to some of the hamlets and villages within the Adirondacks. Very tightly compacted downtown core, surrounded by, as I said before, millions of acres of forests, lots of lakes, and lots of camps and lodges. But here, as the stars are reflecting in this center of this downtown map, are the places in which our storytellers will come. First is Lucy Van Hook from Arkataden. Arkataden is really focused on revitalizing the Great Northern Paper Mill site here. Great Northern Paper was one of the leading producers of pulp and paper in the world. On the left is a historical photo. On the right is the current site that's being redeveloped. They're also working on downtown redevelopment projects. This is at 230 Penobscot, an old department store building that they're renovating. You'll hear from Matt Delaney, who's the librarian at the Millinocket Memorial Library, has really orchestrated a complete turnaround of the library, its facility, and the energy in which that entity and the space that the library provides for community. And finally, we'll hear from Jessica Massey from Design Lab, a private business person with her husband who decided that this is where they wanted to place their business in the heart of Millinocket and be part of not just things that were happening there, but part of brand and graphic design work across the country and across the world. I will say that as we think about people working on community and many of them coming from outside the community, it raises this question of, that many of you pose to others and we are posed ourselves, is where are you from? Sometimes that's used as a way to credential people and keep them at bay. It's another way to understand where people are coming from. But in many cases, it's used to strike judgment. And one thing I will say today is that while none of these people that you'll hear from today are from Millinocket, meaning born there, I think you can really agree that they can claim that they are now from that place and they're redefining what that means. So I'm going to turn now to our panel and I'm going to invite Lucy, Matt, and Jessica to join us. And with the limited time, we're going to have them go through their experiences, share that with you. And the prompting questions are really what brought them to Millinocket? What keeps them there? What's challenging about remaining in that community in such a distant place that they weren't born? What initiatives are they investing in to help strengthen the community? And what creative solutions do they see that can be placed elsewhere? And really, what advice do they have when you all are looking to welcome new people to your communities? So with that, I'm going to pass it to Lucy to kick off this conversation. Lucy, just look for my finger to go up that we're going to hand the baton to Matt, and then Jessica is going to play cleanup, and then we'll go to a quick questions. No, we're not going for questions, maybe questions from our panel, not from the wider floor. But at that point, I'll hand it off to Lucy.
Great, thanks so much, Rob. What brought me to Millinocket, Maine was love. My now husband and I were doing a long distance dating routine, and there were 199 miles door to door. He is a forester, and so he was working as the forester in the scientific forest management area for Baxter State Park. It's a very place-based job. I was doing policy work down in southern Maine, didn't love that job particularly. And so I was working with fishermen at the time, so I joked that I needed to fish or cut bait. And so I cut bait down there and moved up to Millinocket to join my boyfriend then, and sort of signed on to being a stay-at-home girlfriend for a year, not knowing exactly what it would look like moving up here. I pieced together some remote contract work. I set up a pottery studio in my basement, and sold some mugs at the Millinocket Marathon Artisan Fair. Again, sort of trying to figure out like, what did it look like for me to live up here? It was really isolating that first year because I didn't have any way to sort of engage with the community. I still got, sort of like, are you here on vacation looks when I went to the grocery store 6 months in. And then I had done a lot of community engagement work in different roles. And I heard through the grapevine that this somewhat new nonprofit organization focusing on community and economic development called Katahdin was looking to hire their first staff person. And so I joined the Katahdin team and quickly was sort of tasked with engaging community members and instilling a sense of pride again and hope and empowerment in terms of helping to reverse sort of the emotional and economic trend that was downward. And I was sort of hit with a panic of like, how am I, newcomer, who never knew the town when the mill was functioning, and who most often got greeted with, I'm X generation Millinocket resident, what are you? And my response was, I was born in California. I'm not even from Maine. It was hard. And so one of the things that helped a lot was I got some sort of inherited street cred because my board was all alumni from the region. And so we're this nice blend of newcomer and history. So most of my board, Jess Massey also serves on the board of Katahdin, so she's local, but a lot of them were sort of that first generation that had to move away and didn't have automatic jobs at the mill site. And so we have this nice blend of growing up here, but currently not living here. And then sort of this new influx of people who currently does live here. Part of the work that I do also is wholly dependent on the work of many other people. And because these big sort of messy problems, right, require a lot of oars in the water. We like to joke that we had oars in the water, but we were just sort of spinning in circles for a while because we didn't have that sort of common goal to reach for. And I hear a lot of similarities with the attracting new residents strategy, right? There's like this strategy, it might have multiple prongs on how you approach, but it's this common, holy grail that you can sort of aim towards. And building on the work of Katahdin revitalization, the Millinocket Memorial Library, local businesses that were dependent on, a vibrant economy, the Northern Forest Center, philanthropy, we launched through this new forming network called the Katahdin Collaborative, a vision and action plan, because we realized that we had to sort of get to these common values in order to identify like, where do we want to go? And so over 18 months, we built this book that is now called the Katahdin Gazetteer, a vision and action plan for the future. And that is like what engages me and what keeps me doing this work. And some of the things that emerged were people wanted baby strollers on the streets and they wanted lights on in homes when they went for walks in the evening. And I'm proud to say that since moving here, I've added 2 new residents to the Millinocket population. I'll turn it to you, Jess. Oh, Matt's next, sorry.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Lucy and Rob. My name is Matt Delaney, and I am the director of the Millinocket Memorial Library. And I guess like my origin story to Millinocket is I was actually living my whole life in New York. I grew up in Albany, and then I was a librarian in Syracuse. But I had been working in like administrative roles, and I'd kind of just grown tired of the bureaucracy of county library work. So my partner, Emily, and I started looking, we traveled around the country and we were always thinking about like, where would be an exciting place to go to like kind of start over, because we were both kind of burning out of our bureaucratic jobs. And so we had a couple of criteria that we were looking for. We both loved rural places. We wanted to be close to adventure, mountains and rivers. And one of the things that occurred to us when we were traveling around visiting all these different places was like, when we were traveling, we were in these really cool places, and we just, you probably, a lot of people do this, think about what would it be like to live here? What if we made our lives? What if we set ourselves up to live in a place that we would otherwise be traveling to? And so that was something that we were always thinking about. And we knew that I was looking for a library director job, and that met those criteria. And I saw a job posting for the Millinocket Memorial Library, which had closed because it had lost all of its funding from the town. So ultimately, we were looking at 5 different places in the Northeast, and a lot of them were established towns with movie theaters and restaurants and things that Millinocket does not have. I mean, we have a couple of restaurants, but not a lot of art and culture and those things that we had become accustomed to. But it didn't matter so much, because what Millinocket did offer was it was a community clearly in transition, and it was struggling for sure. But in my few visits there to try to understand what was happening, I saw that there was a national monument that had just been created. There was a lot of attention around a marathon that was, in the North Maine woods. There was a great, there's Mount Katahdin and a great state park. And then when you drove through town, I just had the sense I could see like construction happening in different places. It just seemed to be a place of opportunity. And ultimately for us, in discussing where we wanted to go, it was like, do we want to buy into another person's vision of an established place that had been that way for a long time, and it had all that cool stuff, and there was a high price tag to buy into that? Or did we want to take a risk and go to a place where we could be on the ground trying to be part of reimagining what a small rural town and a cool place would look like? And that's what we ended up choosing. And then just personally, I think I'm really drawn to like underdog stories, sort of, and I became fascinated by all the people that were motivated to rebuild this library that had closed. So it just seemed kind of like a blank slate and a lot of opportunity and uncertainty, which was appealing. I think it was, like Lucy said, it was really challenging at first in some ways, just to navigate, to understand. I had no credibility. I had no social connections. I was very fortunate to have a clear identity in that I was like the town librarian, and I had clarity of purpose, which was to save this library with this group of people. And that helped me, I think, adapt or be resilient to like a little bit of the isolation that would come with coming to a place like this, the clarity of purpose, the meaningful work. And then I had people like Jessica, who is on the board of the library, who was really, there were people that were very deliberate about connecting me to like-minded people, or just to the social like infrastructure there. That was key. I think still to this day, I've been here for 5 years almost, and we've done a lot of great work with the library. But I think one of the really hard things I shouldn't say really hard things. One of the things that I continue to kind of try to understand is how decisions are made in a place like this, when there's kind of like a vacuum of decision-making power. How does somebody from away, or that grew up here, how do we work together towards like the common goal that Lucy was talking about? And fortunately, there has been a high emphasis on putting goals and strategies out there for people like me to understand and like plug into. I guess I'll stop there and turn it over to Jessica.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Massey. It's a real pleasure to talk to everyone today. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been really great hearing about some of the work that is being done in the Adirondacks. The last time I was there was 2017. I was part of this economic development delegation. There were like 5 of us that went to visit Lake Placid. And we met with Jim McKenna, I believe his name was, and some folks with Roost. So we did a lot of different things. We toured the area, but one of the highlights was eating at the Lake Placid Lodge. It was amazing. Your area is incredibly beautiful. It reminded me a lot of here, actually. You guys have 46 peaks, though I think we only have 40, so you've got us on that front. We have common history. We both have a history kind of rooted in natural resources, and it sounds like we have common aspirations for the future. So I'll tell you a little bit about my own journey here to Millinocket. It actually started when I was 8 years old. I climbed Mount Katahdin, and Mount Katahdin is that peak that you saw in the distance when Rob did his introduction. It's the terminus of the Appalachian Trail. It's really a spectacular mountain. So over the years, I've climbed it several times. I've visited the area lots of times growing up. And so back, after I left high school, went to college, my husband and I lived in Boston. And we always knew that we wanted to come back to Maine when it was time to raise a family. So we started by buying a house. We knew we wanted to live close to outdoor recreation, but we wanted to make a living also. So we started off working in Boston. We bought a place in Millinocket. We came up here part-time every weekend, essentially. That was in 2005. And by 2009, we were getting ready to have kids. But we had this problem with Millinocket, and that was we couldn't get anything beyond dial-up. So my husband, I was in this field of science. My husband was doing graphic design. He could work anywhere. But when we were in Millinocket, he'd send a file before he went to bed at night, and our fingers were crossed that by morning that file would be successfully delivered, because it was just so slow. We actually, when we were working with our video processor, we'd take a hard drive and put it on a bus or put it in the mail to get it to him because our internet was just so slow. But some good things happened. We were able to get like 10 over 2 by the time 2009 rolled around. So we bought a place and we moved here full time by 2009. So then we had kids shortly after. But Millinocket was a good fit for us. I mean, we love the wildness of the place. When I describe Millinocket, I often compare it to that bar in Star Wars, the cantina, where everyone gathers before they go off into deep space. And that's sort of what it's like here. There are poets and scientists and writers and artists and people working in the woods, and they all gather at this one bar in downtown Millinocket. It's a really fun place to be. But importantly, we wanted to raise our children close to nature. And so Millinocket and this area really fit the bill for us. I'm going to go back to broadband just for a second, because I can't really overstate how important it is to our future. With Design Lab, my company, we do a lot of marketing, we do video production, we do graphic design. So we have these huge files that we need to transfer. We are able to work here because of high-speed internet. We now have fiber at our building. We have a distributed office, so that's been really helpful during the pandemic. Our staff, they work all over the state, and in some cases out of the state. Our clients, we can live here, but our clients are everywhere. Broadband really pulls Millinocket from the outside looking in. Millinocket's at the end of the line. It's really a remote place. But broadband changes that completely. It takes Millinocket from the end of the line to the middle of the line. And so there's a real opportunity as we think about our future here to attract remote workers, to attract people working in the digital economy, working in the creative economy. And it sounds like from the speakers that preceded our group, that you guys have a good handle on planning for a broadband build out. So that's fantastic. That's been really important for us. In terms of my motivation, I can really relate to what Callie said in her introduction about her child going to a school that doesn't have a lot of students in the class. And, when you see this shrinkage in the number of children in the classroom, it's alarming, because we need young people, we need families, we need babies being born. Matt contributed 1 child, thank you, Matt, and Lucy contributed 2 children to the population. I've contributed 2, so we're working on it. But we need an influx of new people. My 7-year-old, her entire grade has 21 children in it, in East Millinocket. So that's a big motivation for me. I think about the question every single day: how do we get people to move to Millinocket? How do we revitalize this place? And so broadband is a really important part of that. Creating great quality of place is an important part of that. In terms of where I've leaned in. I sit on a couple boards in town, but the most important thing that I think I've contributed, and my husband and I have contributed to this area, is simply, instead of telling people what to do, we just do it. We see something that wants to be done, and instead of complaining about it, we make a plan and we get started. And that attracts like-minded people who also have common goals. That's been the most successful strategy as I look back over the last 10 years in this area, is really getting those community champions together and working on common goals. It's really important for local government and state government and even national government to foster enabling conditions like broadband and good policy and all those things, investments in infrastructure. Those things are really important. But then you need the community champions that really have a vision for their future. And they're the ones that are going to make that vision a reality. The other thing, of course, is the partnerships with other organizations. Northern Forest Center has been fantastic in terms of being a partner and really building local capacity and fostering leadership skills of champions already in the community. They're an accelerator. They've helped us immeasurably in this community, and they hand out fantastic merch. So note Matt's hat and my shirt. they're really a fun partnership. We enjoy working with them, and we're happy to talk with other communities, and we love hearing the stories from other communities that Northern Forest has partnered with, and we're just really, really delighted to be. I feel like the rural communities of the United States, we need to learn from each other, because I think there's a model out there, and Northern Forest is working really hard to figure out what that model is. So with that, thank you.
Jess, thanks so much. With our time, you guys were very, very tight on your time here. So we do have a little bit of time. So I want to just mention, I think that as I went through the slideshow, each of you had a physical place, a building you were working on that I think is representative of progress when people come into the community. But Jess, you really talked about the human capital that each of you have brought. And as I observe when I'm in town, how many different seats you all and hats you wear. It's not easy to do both of those, but those things, meaning the volunteerism, the action, as well as the doing, the visible process of building renovation. We've seen it with some of the residential units that we have in Millinocket. I'm curious if each of you want to speak a little bit to this tension of getting visible things done and bringing the community along. They're not at odds with each other, but that is a key component to not leaving people behind when you're trying to do long-term systems change. And I think we've all talked about planning is something that many people get very fatigued by, and yet it's so critical. So Lucy, you set us up earlier with the Katahdin Gazetteer. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that tension between engaging people, doing things, and then that visible product, and we'll go through our panel again.
Yeah, sure, Rob. Yeah, we call the Gazetteer like a lifetime body of work. We wanted to get it right, and we wanted to vet it with all, so it includes 8 communities that surround Katahdin, because we have a lot of commonalities across those towns, similar demographics, proximity to wild, distance to city centers. And so we wanted to ensure that our community engagement was deep enough and that we were meeting people where they were, both sort of physically. We went to events, we went to bingo halls, we went to church sessions, we did mailers, we hosted community sessions, we had input online. And so, and then we rolled out multiple drafts and said, is this right? Like chew this up, spit this out, put the sticky dots on the wall. We wanted to make sure that it was truly reflective of what the communities said and wanted, recognizing that there wasn't really going to be an appetite to do this again in 5 years or 10 years. And now, with some coordination and support, there are 203 action items in this plan, and they're sort of available for anyone or any cluster of people to pick up and start running with. There's suggestions of organizations or individuals who might be very closely aligned with them. So there's this inherent sort of collaboration that you can pick up with. But it's we're in go mode now, knowing that any action item that comes out of the Gazetteer is very well vetted within the community. That you can start to take steps. Some are early wins, so that you can show that tangible progress. Similar, like we just put a new facade on that ugly green, fondly called Green Monster building that we have on Main Street. Because it's that combination of sort of that long-term goal and some deep infrastructure investments coupled with sort of the visible. For example, our Katahdin had put in $350,000 into the building, and it looked exactly the same if you were driving down the street. We had a new roof, we had to do some asbestos and mold remediation. And so, we got to the point where we're like, we need a new face so that we can demonstrate progress. I'll stop there.
Jester,
I can
Matt, you
just-
want to dive in? Yep,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
can just say kind of quickly, we're unique because for two reasons. One, public libraries in general are pretty neutral, like welcoming, well appreciated institutions. But the second thing is the library had literally closed down. So the changes that we were bringing were kind of going from nothing to something, I think. And I would also say for us, the physical transformation, we kept using this narrative that it was symbolic of the transformation that was happening in the town. So we wanted to show that change. And I think we knew that as there always are, there would be people that resisted seeing their 55-year-old library updated. But we also accepted that if we're going to talk about bringing this community or supporting the necessary changes, that we wanted something to visually represent that. So yeah, that's what I'd say about the library.
And I'll just quickly add that our Katahdin is an excellent model of what small wins look like. So our Katahdin is tackling this long-term, beast of a mill site that in economic development takes a long time. But what they also do in tandem is they've built a system to celebrate small wins within the community. And I think as long as you're celebrating small wins and people can see that there's progress, even if it's just painting a local bandstand, putting up a Christmas tree in a visible spot, these things really lionize the community and get people motivated. So work on the long-term stuff, but celebrate small wins.
Yeah, great advice. I'm seeing we have, I think, 6 minutes left in this segment before we go to our closing comments. And there's some folks who have posted some questions in the Q&A feature. I have a hard time multitasking and doing both here, but I'll try to raise a couple of those to the panel conversations or to the panelists and their perspectives. The first one really is thinking about diversity within community and how we think about encouraging people of color to come to rural communities when traditionally that has not been the population. Now we do have Native communities, of course, in Maine and across the region, but would like to have you all maybe think about what does diversity mean to you all and how are you trying to address that in some of the work that you're doing? Or how are you thinking about that issue personally as well, from many of you coming from elsewhere where there more diversity was apparent?
Yeah, I'll jump in quickly because I can pair it from the Gazetteer again. So there are 6 principles for the future. Obviously, none of you can read these words, but one of them is welcoming. Recognizing that it's hard to have new people come in when you've been sort of an insular community. So in order to create the future we want, we will ensure our attitudes, behaviors, and signage are welcoming to new locals and visitors alike. Welcome new ideas and people into our towns, schools, businesses, and institutions. And I think, Rob, that's not necessarily a strategy or an answer, but it's calling out the need that we actively need to think about how to be welcoming. And one suggestion that came in those conversations was creating a welcome basket that had, links or contact information for plumbers, electricians, roofers, recognizing that a lot of the homes that people are buying are, 30 years without maintenance. Rob, you know this better than anyone probably on the call. And so like something simple like that, like here's a network that you can plug into. Here are resources that are available to you. Maybe it includes things like school registration dates and sports sign up dates. A simple gesture like that can go a long way. When being new in town, I didn't know any of that information. And obviously there are deeper components too that start, that are much slower in terms of welcoming community members that on the surface look different than what the community as a whole looks like.
I can just say that as a new parent of an 8-month-old baby, that question, how do you feel about raising children in an all-white community? That definitely makes me nervous, and I don't know really how to. I'm not sure what that means for me, and I know with a lot of things that have happened over the last couple of years and beyond, living in Millinocket has been particularly challenging to understand how I can play a meaningful role in working on these issues. I'll just leave it at that.
I'll echo what Lucy and Matt just said. I mean, it's tough, it's challenging. The entire state of Maine is 99% white, I believe is the current statistic. So, we travel with the kids, we do a lot of talking with our children. And, but, it goes back to making sure that we're part of the solution in terms of creating a welcoming community for folks that want to move here. And that's where we can be now.
Great, thanks, Jess. Lucy, some people have been asking for in the chat, are interested in seeing a copy of the Gazetteer. I think you have that online, and maybe you're able to post that into the chat, and we can follow up with that. One last quick note, as we're talking about welcoming new people to communities, and you all have fit that and talking about diversity and this. Curious as to how you all have engaged multi-generational residents in your work and what the receptivity has been. I know from my experience being in town, they are there right beside you, and it's a fallacy to say it's a us and them. But I just want you to touch a little bit on how that has worked in each of your experiences. And again, we have 2 minutes left here, so.
Oh,
Matt?
I'm not muted. Can somebody else go first? I didn't hear the question.
Sure, I can jump in. A lot of the initiatives that we've been involved with over the last many years we have encountered some local resistance, but it took a lot of listening on our part to really understand where folks were coming from. I can't describe how traumatized this community has been. I mean, they've suffered catastrophic job loss, incredible population decline. Every time change came around the corner, it meant loss. And so when you come in and you want to make all this change, the gut reaction is to be fearful and and then after fear, of course, comes anger. And so the best thing that we've been able to do is listen, make sure there were a lot of different voices at the table and focus on common goals. But it isn't easy, especially fights over national monuments and parks and green space and the tension between the natural resources being a place of recreation versus commercial extraction. There's just an inherent tension in so many of the things that we do, but it's, for us, our experience has been if you listen and are inclusive, and that goes a long way.
Lucy?
Yeah, I would just add quickly, we're really trying to take a both and approach, whether it's like industry development and outdoor recreation development, and then also with history and future looking. We can't build a strong future if we don't include the significant history of the past. And so we need both, and there needs to be, there need to be changes. Otherwise, we continue to sort of decline in size and space.
Thank you all so much. I would just say in sort of my closing comments of being an outsider, but somewhat of a sort of insider to the Millinocket story in our partnership with you all. You carry that tension, Lucy, that you talk about of looking forward, looking back, cross-sector, cross-community, lead, follow with incredible humility. You listen first, you act, you beg for permission sometimes after. And I think that is the progress that is being seen on the ground is really evident of your leadership. So I would invite those in the Adirondacks to take a road trip. It is a little bit lengthy, but you will benefit greatly from seeing Millinocket, standing on the street corner, walking up and down. Last time I was there, a couple horses went up and down Main Street. So it was a different way to see traffic patterns. But again, Lucy, Jess, Matt, thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to represent the town and your work. And we are just so appreciative of your partnership. So with that, I think I'm handing it back to Bob and Craig, I think. Thank you.
Rob, thank you for expanding our world by bringing in Millinocket. Jess, Lucy, Matt, thank you for taking the time to join us today. Your experiences of relocations and grassroots engagement are our inspirations for sure. So we wish you well with your continuing endeavors. And Rob, what you had put up there, the goal of renewing pride, purpose, and vitality, I think resonates with us all. That's something that we all share and we're looking to do. Some of the points that you all had hit on resonated with our situations. That Lucy, building on existing work done by others, keeping up that momentum. And the one thing that can bog us down, there are many oars in the water, but having someone like you really helps on keeping the boat going forward. And we're going to have to look into this gazetteer because that's an excellent item for engaging the community. And when you last said the both and attitude approach, that's going to be helpful as we engage the community going forward. Matt, being attracted to a community in transition, is a community that's going in the right direction. That's and seeing that as a place of opportunity, that really shows a pioneer spirit to choose a place that's not ready-made, but still needs work. And those are our homes. Those are our communities. We all still need a little work and we need that spirit. So you brought it home the importance of having goals and objectives for the community to see and participate in achieving. And Jessica, recognizing our commonality in the northern forest region. This is one of the great things of having the Northern Forest Center with us from Maine through the Adirondacks. There's a lot of similarities. And how the settling down time of life prompted your search of where to be. You were basing that on quality of life attributes there. So, pointing out that there's a community with a gathering place and good access to the outdoors, and how broadband allows your business to be able to go far while living in a chosen community. So, and also the just do it attitude that goes along with that pioneer attitude attracts like-minded community champions. I think one of the things that we have problems with on accepting change in areas is that we are afraid that who we are and what we do will also change. But by being who we are, it attracts others that are like us. So good to recognize the importance of all the small wins. Thank you. Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you to close out today's meeting.
Yep.
I thank everyone for attending and look forward to seeing you and your friends at the summer forum. Thank you. Bob?
Let me just start by saying we did it on time and with the Zoom technology, so kudos to all that made that happen. I have some news to leave you with. The summer forum, CGA summer forum, will be in the summer, July-ish. The date hasn't been yet, not locked in. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. You can do that in the chat room for updates from CGA. If you're interested in pursuing activities that Leslie described and the panel described in the A&R, please go to Leslie and ask her that. And there'll be follow-up to questions and answers and comments made in the chat that we can try and get back to you, at least on many of those on the website. In summary, this meeting, to me, my observations is super energy, great participation, There's a certain collective energy and inertia that I see in all of the areas that we talked about. And we hope this creates an immense excitement for moving the ball forward on this collectively with good positive energy and teamwork. Thank you all so much for your participation, and to the Northern Forest Center for partnership with Common Ground. And with that, we'll sign off. A big thank you. Enjoy spring and be safe.